In school, cheating is certainly not uncommon. When hearing the word cheating, the image that usually shows up is an act done by students who are not good at academics and wanted a shortcut. But what if this time it was a genius student who led the biggest cheating act in history? The story begins with a young girl named Lynn, a genius with many achievements and perfect grades. One day, Lynn's father plans to transfer his daughter to a better high school for Lynn's future. The principal at this new high school is quite impressed with Lynn's perfect grades and achievements. But Lynn is quite hesitant to transfer to this high school because, according to her calculations, the cost required to transfer to this high school is quite expensive. Not wanting to lose a prospective student who is a genius like Lynn, the principal is finally willing to provide a scholarship so that Lynn can go to school here. When school starts, Lynn meets a girl named Grace in the middle of an ID photo session. After getting acquainted, they became good friends. Grace is a good girl, but unlike Lynn, she is not very good at academics. One day, Grace tells Lynn she is in trouble because she cannot participate in a theater event if her grades do not meet the requirements. Amidst their conversation, Lynn quickly answers the questions on the question sheet that Grace is holding just by looking at it. Noticing that Lynn is brilliant, Grace asks Lynn to teach her to improve her grades. On the day of the midterm exam, Lynn notices that the exam questions they get are the same questions she and Grace answered when they studied together. Lynn then tells Grace about this coincidence, but still, Grace doesn't know how to answer the questions even though they studied together. Seeing her best friend struggling, Lynn decides to help Grace by slipping an eraser containing the answers into her shoe. While switching shoes, they almost get caught, but luckily they manage to avoid their teacher just in time. After the exam, Grace is happy because she earned a decent score, while Lynn scored perfectly. To celebrate this, Grace invites Lynn to a pool party with Grace's boyfriend. Later in the evening, Lynn meets Pat, Grace's boyfriend, who came from a wealthy family. Pat heard Grace's story about Lynn helping her grades by giving her a cheat sheet on the last midterm exam. After that, Pat offers Lynn a large sum of money if she is willing to help Pat and his friends during the exam, just like she helped Grace before. At first, Lynn does not want to do that and hesitates to accept Pat's offer. However, Pat and Grace tell Lynn that their school secretly charged all students a fee for entering their prestigious high school, and even those scholarship recipients are obliged to pay the fees. Later, Lynn finds out that what her friends said was true, as Lynn found proof of payment from her father to Lynn's school. Knowing this, Lynn feels sad because her father, who had a meager salary, had to pay for Lynn's school fees which were not cheap. After knowing that her father paid a lot of money to the school for her, Lynn decides to help her family's economy by accepting Pat's offer to earn a lot of money. After that, Lynn invents a finger gesture based on the piano keys. Each finger movement represents a letter which her clients will memorize. With that method, Lynn distributes her exam answers to her clients in every exam. Since then, Lynn's cheating business hidden under the pretext of piano lessons has grown, with more clients coming to Lynn. With money from the cheating business, she plans to return the favor to her father by buying him things. One day, Lynn represents her school in a competition along with another student named Bank, a young genius who is also a scholarship recipient. Even though he comes from a low-income family, Bank is an honest student and does not tolerate things like cheating. Because both Lynn and Bank are brilliant, they easily win the competition as a team. After returning to their school, the principal praises those two genius students. Then, the principal informs them that their school received an offer to send one of their students to join an international scholarship program. This information causes the two of them to compete in the scholarship program. When Bank returns home, he notices that his mother's laundry business is in bad condition because most of its equipment is broken. Banks cannot bear to see his mother exhausted and decides to help wash the laundry manually even though he is also tired. The next day at school, a student named Tong approaches Bank and begs to be allowed to copy his answers. However, Bank refuses Tong's request even after Tong offers to pay Bank if he lets him copy his answer. When the exam begins, Bank notices that Tong is attempting to copy Lynn's answer. However, Bank has no idea that Lynn is running a cheating business, and Tong is one of her clients but has trouble memorizing Lynn's finger gestures. When Bank finishes answering his exams, he warns Lynn that Tong is trying to copy her answers. Then, Bank also tries to report Tong's action to the supervising teacher. However, the supervising teacher ignores Bank's report because the exam has two different sets of question sheets, so there is no way Tong could copy Lynn's answer. After knowing that there are two different question sheets, all of Lynn's clients start to panic. However, Lynn solves the situation by distributing the answers to her clients who have the same question sheet as her. Then, when she gets the chance, Lynn exchanges question and answer sheets with Tong and starts solving the other question sheet. In a short time, Lynn solves the questions on the other sheet and then sends the answers to clients who also get the other question sheet. Surprisingly, Lynn manages to give her clients the answers to the other question sheet without getting caught by the supervising teacher. After the exams, Lynn and her friends are glad they managed to pull the act successfully. But suddenly, Lynn and Tong are called to the principal's office. There, Lynn sees Banks, who had reported that Tong was trying to copy Lynn's answer sheet to the principal. Tong does not admit to the allegations, while Lynn pretends not to be involved in the allegations. Suddenly, the supervising teacher comes to the principal's office to explain that there is no way Tong could cheat on Lynn's answer sheet because the question sheets they had were different. However, Lynn's scrap sheet soon becomes evidence of Lynn's involvement. Based on Lynn's scrap sheet, it is clear that Lynn was solving the questions that were not on her question sheet, thus proving her guilty. Soon after, Lynn's father comes to the school because of Lynn's involvement in the cheating scandal. The principal expresses how disappointed she is with Lynn's behavior and decides to cancel Lynn's scholarship. Hearing this, Lynn retaliates by expressing her disappointment with her school for charging her father an entrance fee even though she received a scholarship. After hearing Lynn's statement, the principal decides to revoke Lynn's opportunity to join the international scholarship program and chooses that only Bank will get that opportunity. Hearing the principal's decision, Bank regrets his action because this is not what he wanted when he reported Tong to the principal. When Lynn returns home, her father reveals how disappointed he is in Lynn, who had lied about her piano tutoring lesson, which she used as an excuse for her cheating business. Lynn's father tells her that it is his fault Lynn had become like this and asks her to stop doing this cheating business and immediately return the money to Lynn's client. 1 year after the incident, Grace invites Lynn to have dinner together. Amidst their conversation, Grace asks Lynn to do the cheating again. However, they are not going to cheat for the regular exam. Instead, they plan to cheat on the international standardized test for university admissions called STIC. Grace then tells Lynn that she and Pat have to pass this exam because Pat's parents thought that Grace helped raise Pat's grades back then. Because of that, Pat's parents want to pay for Grace's college if she is willing to go to a university in Boston with Pat. In desperation, Grace and Pat don't have a choice but to ask for Lynn's help to fulfill what Pat's parents asked. Lynn does not want to agree to this risky request as she had risked and lost too much back then. In response, Grace tries to persuade Lynn by saying that Pat will pay an even more considerable amount of money than Lynn had ever made if she agrees to help them. Lynn decides to think before accepting Grace and Pat's offer. But then Lynn thought cheating on the STIC exam would be difficult or impossible. When Lynn plans to return the practice books for the STIC to Grace and Pat, her attention is drawn to the international clock on the reception wall. Lynn then realizes they can use the difference in time zone to their advantage to cheat the STIC test. The next day, Lynn explains her plan to Grace and Pat. The STIC exam will start at the same time around the world, but due to time zone differences, some countries will start the STIC exam earlier than others. The plan is to complete the exam questions in Australia and then share the answer with Grace and Pat before the exam starts in Thailand. However, Lynn also asks to sell the answers to more people so they will make more profit as she plans to also study in Boston. In addition, Lynn also states that she might not be able to memorize all the answers by herself. Therefore, she would need someone with good memories, like Bank. However, Lynn knows that Bank will not help them because Bank cannot tolerate cheating. On the night before the scholarship exam, 2 thugs suddenly approach Bank and beat him until he passes out. When he wakes up the next day, Bank finds himself dumped in a landfill, which causes him to fail to attend his scholarship exams. Some day later, Lynn meets Bank and invites him to join her cheating scheme. Bank initially rejects Lynn's offer because he does not want to be involved in such illegal activities. Lynn tries to convince Banks that they are both in the same position as they weren't born into wealthy families to live peacefully. Even though Bank tries not to cheat, life will cheat on Bank anyway. Lynn then says that if Bank decides to join, she and her crew will wait for him at Grace's address. The following day, Bank decides to join Lynn's scheme because he needs money. After that, Lynn and Bank start to practice answering the questions and memorizing each half of all the answers. At each break between exam sessions, they will send answers to the crew via smartphones they hide in the toilet. After that, Grace and Pat will convert their answers into pencil barcodes that they will later distribute to clients. In addition, to overcome the essay part, Bank will pretend to be sick so that later he can go to the toilet and send the essay keywords to Pat and Grace. On the last day of preparation, Pat accidentally says something that makes Bank realize that Pat was the mastermind behind Bank's accident the other day. Enraged, Banks jumped at Pat and beat him. An accidental blow from Bank also hits Lynn, who tries to separate them. Pat confesses that he didn't expect his goons to go that far, and he states that he did it to get Bank to join their scheme. Hearing this, Bank blames them for making him lose the chance to make his mother happy. Pat apologizes to Bank, but Bank decides to walk away from the scheme. Lynn, who also finds out about Pat's doing, chooses to cancel their plans and goes after Bank. However, after thinking about all that had happened, Bank comes back and asks Lynn to finish what she started and take responsibility because it was Lynn who caused this to happen to Bank, and at least he would get the money if he continued. Therefore, they resume their plan and go to Australia for the STIC exam. Banks apologizes to Lynn for accidentally hitting her back then. Lynn forgives Bank and asks him to focus on tomorrow. The next day, Lynn and Bank finish the first session quickly before the break. However, when they get the chance to send the answers, Bank suddenly asks the crew to raise his share during break time if they want him to send his answer. Initially, Pat refuses it, but Grace persuades Bank by sending half of Bank's request and promises to give the other half later. After that, Lynn and Bank continue their second session of the exam. But after the second session, someone reported Bank to the committee because he was in the toilet for too long, making others suspicious. Meanwhile, Lynn couldn't send her answers because of the long toilet queue. On the other side, the committee caught Bank red-handed for using a phone in the toilet. But, Bank managed to delete all messages related to their scheme, so there is no evidence. Unfortunately, Lynn could not send her second session answers yet but managed to avoid getting caught. Lynn then has to complete the third session and remember all the questions without Bank. Lynn struggles to memorize all the answers by herself but manages to do it. After that, Lynn tries to memorize the keywords for essay questions and then escapes the room by sticking a pencil down her throat to vomit. When she gets out, Lynn tries to escape the committee that arrested Banks because they also suspect her. While avoiding the committee, Lynn sends the remaining answers from the exam she had memorized to the panicked Grace and Pat as they are running out of time soon. After she finishes sending the answers and hides the phone, the committee catches Lynn and escorts her back to the STIC office for questioning. Upon arriving at the STIC office, Lynn sees Bank being interrogated and confesses that he used his smartphone in the toilet to open an online dictionary, hiding their actual scheme. Bank then gestures to Lynn to tell her to return to Thailand first and confess to the committee that she doesn't know him. When Lynn returns to Thailand, Grace and Pat greet her and tell her that their scheme was a big success. Drowned with guilt, Lynn refuses to celebrate and even turns down her share. Lynn insists on refusing her share and cuts all contact with her crew. In comparison, Bank has already taken his share. After that scandal, Bank was expelled from the school and used his share to invest in his mom's laundry business. One day, Bank invites Lynn to meet him at his place. When they meet, Bank proposes a new, safer cheating plan with much bigger potential clients and larger profit. Lynn tells Bank to take her former share instead if he needs money, but Bank insists on doing this because even if he studies hard, he will end up as an office worker with less money than this scheme. However, Lynn refuses to join him even after Bank threatens to expose Lynn as the mastermind of the last STIC scheme if she doesn't join him. Despite that, Lynn chooses to redeem herself and walk away. In the end, Lynn decides to submit a formal confession of her crime to the STIC organization, ending her story. Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications, and leave a like and comment to help the channel out. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.